Welcome. All right, we're going to get started with our afternoon panel. I know it is right after lunch. People are well fed. Hopefully, you've whetted your appetite for food, but we'll have a conversation which will be hopefully equally appetizing today. This session is called Payment with Purpose, How Better Payments Can Make People More Charitable. Right? So we're going to talk about the effects of payment technology. We're going to talk about charitable giving more generally, and effects that technology have on both the giving and receiving charity. My name is Dilip Soman. I am a professor at the University of Toronto, and I lead a research center called BEAR, Behavioral Economics in Action, at the Rotman School. We're a center that's interested in behavioral science and its intersection with technology and business and policy and welfare. And so I'm actually looking forward to this conversation. I think everything you guys have to say today will be of immense learning value to me, as I suspect to all of you. Before we begin, a couple of quick housekeeping logistics issues. We have about 40 minutes today and 10 minutes for questions. We'll keep the conversation going. Hopefully, we'll have time for questions. And there are a bunch of microphones for questions when we get to that part. And if we don't have time for too many questions, all of us will be here during the break right afterwards. So feel free to catch us and ask us those questions. It is my honor and privilege to share the platform today with three amazing individuals who lead three equally amazing initiatives. I have Michael Faye in the center here, who is the executive director and co-founder of Give Directly, Maher Arar to my left, the CEO of Cost Square, and Robert Opp, who is the director for innovation and change initiatives at the United Nations World Food Program. Three very different organizations from the face of it, but all that share something common, which is charitable giving and purpose. So, gentlemen, welcome. Three amazing initiatives, all of us sharing the stage today. Your journeys all began very differently. So I know you got a PhD in wireless communication. Correct. And business economics and international relations. Tell us a little bit about your journey getting here. Why don't I start with you, Maher, and then maybe we can just go through, and in particular, the last chapter as it relates to payments and charitable giving.
Okay. Well, as you said, I had a PhD in wireless communications. It's very in-demand kind of profession, but what made me rethink my choice is I did not see the end result of my work, and that convinced me that I have to do something where I can see the fruits of my impact on society. That's the essence of it. But what the trigger was is that one day I was sitting down at home and trying to make a donation to an Ottawa charity, and I was struck how hard it was to donate to that charity. And there was so much friction that I just gave up and I went and donated to another charity which is based here in Toronto. So that kind of told me there's something to be done in this field. And when I spoke to others around me, they all shared similar kind of experiences. So in a nutshell, that's what brought me to this field. And we launched Cost Square last year. So do you want me to tell you more about Cost Square now?
Yeah, helpful for those of us who don't know that much.
So Cost Square in a nutshell is a gamified version of GoFundMe, basically, which is a crowdfunding platform that I'm sure all of you has heard of. We do things differently. We have hands-on coaching. We also gamify the giving experience, and we use sales and marketing techniques to try to widen the outreach for the fundraiser. And the end result of this is basically this increases the success rate of the campaign from 30% to about 70%. 30% is very common with the existing platforms. When we launched last year, same time last year, we focused strictly on the nonprofit sector, but recently we have decided to open our platform to personal causes. So if you'd like to launch a campaign, let us know.
Fantastic. And you mentioned gamification. It's something that I think we'll get to as we go through our conversation.
Right.
Michael, maybe give directly. That sounds like a fascinating concept.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also a PhD, not in telecom, but in economics. And I think something pretty remarkable happened in the field of development economics in the early 2000s, which is that we started to measure what worked and what didn't work. And what we learned is that, and a core assumption that many of us shared, and I think the sector as a whole had, which is that the poor could not be trusted to make wise spending decisions, turned out to be wrong. The poor actually had a better track record on spending their own money than kind of we, the global development community, had spending it on their behalf. And when you think about the implications, they're quite profound, because it means that if we can now find a way to get cash or capital directly to the extreme poor, we can do a whole lot of good. And to just frame the numbers on it, Brookings Institute down in DC just put out a number, which is how much it would cost to eliminate extreme poverty if we could magically drop the amount of cash that everyone under the poverty line needed to get above the poverty line. That number is about $70 billion. We spend about $135 billion on aid, so about twice what it would cost. Now, we haven't yet found magic to drop cash, but we have found mobile money, which has completely changed payments for Africa and large parts of Asia and Latin America. So 93 countries now have some form of mobile money. Those countries cover about 4 billion people. So all of a sudden, people that had absolutely no access to digital money do have access to digital money. And when you take that realization with the realization that getting cash or capital to the extreme poor is effective, you get Give Directly, which is a vehicle for the public and donors that work with large donors like Google and folks like that, as well as the general public, send money through Give Directly to the extreme poor. About 90 cents on the dollar gets there. The rest goes for everything like FX, office space, salaries, so on and so forth. And that's what we do. The second company, which I should say a bit about, that I've been working on is Segovia Technology. Now, while mobile payments has great potential, it is also highly fragmented, and the infrastructure is still quite weak. So you're talking about over 270 mobile money providers with some pretty basic infrastructural challenges. Segovia provides a layer, a single open API to access mobile money to make sending payments easier.
Robert?
Yeah, so, well, I have been with the United Nations World Food Program for about 15 years, split into two pieces. The sort of before, when I kind of was working in the field and eventually got fed up with the way things were going, and then the after, which I've been really working to drive change inside the World Food Program. And in the middle, I was a management consultant with the Boston Consulting Group for a couple of years, which was the sort of that turning point for my kind of approach to our work. And I'll explain a little bit about that. But the United Nations World Food Program it's the largest humanitarian agency in the world. And we provide food assistance to about 80 million people a year. And the operations total about $6 billion a year. And we work in the kind of extreme crises that you would see on TV. So right now, we're facing famine in 4 countries. And so we're working hard to bring in food supplies into areas where there's no functioning markets and things. But increasingly, both in crises and non-crisis situations, for the same reasons that Michael was just talking about, the World Food Program is actually providing more in terms of cash transfers, whether it's completely unconditional cash, similar to Give Directly, or whether it's a conditional kind of cash-related voucher that people can take to a local retailer and redeem. And we're basically about 1/3 of our operation is devoted to that kind of program right now. So that's on the kind of programmatic side of things and the way, the kinds of people that we reach. I think one of the reasons that I'm here as well is that we're also looking at how to increase or reach out to more people on the donation side of things. Over 90% of our operations are funded by voluntary contributions, primarily from national governments, donor governments. And we have very little in the way of private individuals. And so we had been looking at the phenomenon of what would actually increase our amount of individual giving, individual fundraising, and what are the levers we could use. So we looked at the trend of smartphones emerging and the rapid penetration of smartphones and created a smartphone-based app called Share the Meal. And you can go into any app store in the world and download Share the Meal for free, and you'll see that it's a sort of a crowdfunding-based platform focused primarily on micro donations, and for 50 cents, you can donate 50 cents, which covers the costs related to providing a meal to one child in one day, or you can scale up that basket to 1 week, 1 month, a year, etc. So we've been experimenting with that. We launched about 1.5 years ago, and we have just about 1 million users, about 830,000 downloads so far, and we've raised $6.5 million with that. Now, in the grand scheme of things, $6.5 million to $6 billion of our operations, we're not there yet in terms of volume of contributions, but we see a positive trend in terms of how to reach individuals.
So interesting, and I think one of the things that struck me while we were going through sort of your journeys was the convergence of psychological insights, technology, and payment here, I think, which is fascinating here. In preparing for the session, we did the usual stuff, phone calls and emails, and me being the professor kind of tried to dig up everything we could find on payment technologies, and then Maher comes up and says, everything we said is in one slide. So that's the slide that you see up there. 3 secrets of giving. People give to people, not to organizations. People give to feel good about themselves. And the easier you make giving, the more charitable they become. Sound like amazingly simple secret sauce principles. Is there any evidence that suggests that easier payments actually affect these 3? Maher, maybe you're nodding.
Let me just
sure.
Give you 2 examples, personal examples, before I jump into the numbers. I now read more books on Amazon than I used to, and the only reason because of the one-click feature that Amazon has. So it's very convenient. I could just, I'm interested to read a book that maybe just came out. I'm here, I'm at home, I could just click and download that book. I noticed that it's easier for me, so I'm now reading, I used to read 1 a month, now I'm reading 2 a month. Mm-hmm. The other example I have, where I live in Ottawa, I have 2 gas stations. One has not yet installed a tap,
right.
And the other one did. And guess which one I go to? The answer is very clear. Now, when it comes to our customers, we have spent a lot of time educating the nonprofit sector about the importance of measuring their conversion rates. And they were shocked by the numbers when we told them about average conversion rate when people land on their donation form, okay? Until the completion of that transaction, it's shockingly low. It's around 13% in the industry. Mm. So with our approach, we've seen numbers rise up to as high as 40%.
Oh,
that's significant. So you do the math, what that translates into.
Sorry.
So we're a mobile-first company. We actually bypassed the desktop altogether. Even though we launched with a mobile app, we are now also serving the same exact app, including the user interface and the user experience from the web to, again, lessen the friction. That's why when you visit the app from the desktop, it's going to look awkward, right? And the reason is because the mobile access and mobile internet access is now at 60% in North America. It is said that by 2020, this number will go up to 80%. And strangely enough, in some countries, it actually has already reached 70%. There are some countries like India, for example, who bypass the desktop altogether. Mm-hmm. Just one more stat I would like to mention here. There has been a study about the impact of mobile giving, and it's been now established that people are 2.2 more likely to donate if they do this on their mobile. And it's actually, it makes sense because 70% of people donate in the moment is when you feel aroused about doing something, right? And those moments, they're very brief. The spike is really brief. So you have to empower the individual to be able to donate wherever they are or wherever they happen to be, especially so after they receive a trigger, let's say a web notification or an email. So you really want to empower them to donate right away instead of until they get home and they get busy with their kids and so on. So they're maybe waiting for the bus, they're waiting at, So this is what we do. We try to remove all the friction and empower people to donate in the moment.
Make it easy, make it fun.
Make it easy, make it fun, and we'll come back to gamification, I guess.
All right.
Yeah.
Any evidence, any stories to share that can highlight the make it easy?
I'll add one thing and then be a little bit provocative. So I completely agree with everything you said, and Give Directly recently launched basically a website, live.givedirectly.org, where we feed in real time everything the recipients of a capital grant say comes directly to the donor. And you can follow people over time. It's unfiltered, so if they say something, maybe they spent it on something that you don't agree with, you'll see it. No one from Give Directly touches that. And that's very much along the same lines.
People.
Exactly. The word of caution, to be provocative, is the following. We get asked a lot why we don't let donors choose whom they give to. So we can tell you after the fact and match you for sure, but we don't give you the choice. And there are a number of reasons for that, but the one that I feel most strongly about is that people don't do a very good job of picking the right people. What we know is that people choose light-skinned, attractive women. That's what the evidence shows. Now, that's not necessarily good social policy, and it's operationally complicated. So if I gave people the choice, we would wind up with a program that is likely not doing the most good it can do. And to give a stat on that, and I forget the exact numbers, but the vast majority, and I think it's close to 75%, if not more, of people that donate to a nonprofit do absolutely no research on the nonprofit. I want to be careful. I want to push people to be educated givers, to be thoughtful givers, and where you don't know which person is more poor or needier, putting that choice over to the organization that you're donating to.
And in your world, Robert, so I think part of it is also the giving, but essentially you're facilitating more exchanges by new technology, and I think that's the other aspect of the making it easy bit.
Yeah, so just to come back to the friction issue. So the World Food Program has conventional donation platforms. So you can go onto the website, navigate to whatever, input your credit card, and give in whatever you want, and there's different campaigns. But Share the Meal was something in addition to that we wanted to really look at this issue of whether we could reduce the friction and incentivize a new group of donors that would capture contributions that we wouldn't get otherwise. And so far the experience shows that that is the case. So whereas in the more conventional route, our average donors, at least in the data that we can gather from them in that platform, are sort of in the kind of 45 to 55 year range. On Share the Meal, the majority of individual givers are millennials, 18 to 34, which account for about 35% of the donor base. And the other issue, since we're in a payments conference, is we've tried to look at the friction within the app. So right now, you download the app, you push a bright yellow button, which was also the subject of A/B testing and behavioral science, if you want to say science, but what users seem to respond to. You navigate then to the page where you pick the basket size, you pick the amount of the contribution you want to give, 50 cents, $1.60, whatever it is. And at that point then, the first time you use the app, you have to put your credit card number in. Now we use currently Braintree for that. But you still need to navigate away out of the app into your browser, input your credit card the first time, and then it takes you back to the app. And we had about 30% conversion rate with that. So not bad, but not as high as we wanted. Very recently, we've put in place agreements and arrangements with Apple Pay and Google Pay. So now, if you're hooked up to Apple Pay or Google Pay, you don't ever have to leave the app. You just confirm in the app. That has doubled our conversion rate. So 30 to 60%, and we just started, so we're still gathering the data on that to see if it's sustainable. But it's quite dramatic. And so the less friction that people feel on that sort of payment side of things, the more likely they are, as Maher was saying, in the spur of the moment, I feel like I want to open this up, I'm going to download, I have the best of intention, and if I can't do that, and it's, oh, I got to put my credit card in, oh, well, maybe next time.
Robert, the only reason that people would go to pay through the browser is because of the Apple policy, right?
Yep.
So that's, I don't know, a lot of people don't know this. It's, and a lot of nonprofits have been angry at Apple. Apple does not actually allow you to do in-app, on the native app, I mean, when I say in-app donation. It's shocking. So the app designer has to take the user, the donor, outside the app to a web browser to make a donation. And that's been an impediment, a huge impediment for, that's why a lot of the new apps launch on Android. We've had this issue and we continue to have this issue.
We're still working, we're working on it. We're trying, lobbying Apple and Google to let us do the in-app billing. And it's not just us, it would be for all the charitable sector. And to their credit, they have certainly been working on their policies for that, but still haven't kind of come up with a clear and comprehensive policy for everybody. The other challenge, since again we're at a payments conference, is that the way that the payments are charged in the credit card gateway, it actually discriminates against micropayments right now.
That's
so
right.
Because there's a partial fixed fee and then a variable rate. And that makes it tough on a 50-cent contribution. You see your kind of percentage of overhead go up because we have to give that fixed fee. And I think that that's another thing that payment providers need to think about in terms of the future of micropayments.
So speaking of frictions, I think we've talked a lot about frictions at the giving end of the pipeline, but there's also the receiving end. And I think, Michael, most of your work, I think you're dealing more with people that are recipients of aid. And walk us through, so the secrets of giving, what are the secrets of receiving? How can payment technologies help people better utilize the donations that are made to them?
Yeah, I think even between the giving and the ultimate receiving is a long chain.
That's right.
Of transactions, which is, as folks here know, remarkably complicated, costly, and slow. You're talking in many cases of, and you'll see this with the M&Os, basically uploading spreadsheets, waiting to see which payments were completed, discovering that lots of them not only failed, but actually are in some unknown state of the world that you don't know whether they're completed or not. And you need to somehow resolve those payments. Because the sender, whether it's an organization or an individual, needs to know whether they need a refund, and the payer wants the money. So how do you do that? Which is a lot of the problems that Segovia has been working on in that channel. One of the biggest problems in that chain is when the recipient finally gets the text message that says, you've gotten 2,000 Kenyan shillings digitally, they need to convert that to physical cash. Now, a lot of folks will say they don't need to, and that's true, they don't need to, but they do. And I think there are lots of reasons for it. Some of them are behavioral. And for a long time, we wondered, why do the poor always cash out digital currency? Why do they always take it out of their mobile wallets? Well, it turns out to be quite rational in a lot of cases. If your average transaction is a few dollars, you'd rather pay one withdrawal fee for your $200 and then make 20 $10 transactions in cash where you don't pay anything than paying a small percentage with a fixed fee for 10 transactions. So this is another example of why are the poor so irrational and silly? Like, they're not. They're actually quite rational and smart. Well, the challenge becomes that when you go to cash out and withdraw this money, the agents, the people that they're pulling the money from, don't have physical cash. So you've now just traveled 6 hours to an agent to exchange your digital cash for physical cash, only to find out that he doesn't have any physical cash. That's a bad experience. So we're working with the MNOs, these are the telcos and kind of mobile money operators, to help them manage liquidity. Because the more information they have on when people like the World Food Program or big NGOs are sending money, the more they can position their agents, the more they can make sure those agents have cash, and the more we can do things in the Segovia platform, like instead of dropping $5 million of payments on one day, spreading it across the month to at least give the agents the chance of getting the liquidity that they need. So these are all the things on the recipient side that we spend a lot of time working on.
And it also strikes me, so I mean, we obviously talked about reducing frictions and using data, that sort of stuff, but Maher, you mentioned this gamification thing, right? Walk us through that. How does that help the entire donating to charity process or perhaps even downstream?
Well, gamification is a new buzzword, but it's basically a combination of motivational psychology, behavioral economics, and social science, as I'm sure you know that. Gamification is with us on an everyday basis. If you just look at your credit card, your air miles, we always collect points. And as humans, we love points. We're addicted to them, even if they sometimes don't serve us anything, because sometimes those points expire. For instance, I have 2 credit cards, right? I use the one that gives me more points. Okay, it just makes sense for me, right? Basically, gamification is a way to entertain us while doing good. And if you look at one of the most successful fundraising campaigns, they actually use a lot of gamification, like the Ice Bucket Challenge, even though it's not entirely online, but it does have that big element. We may not realize this, but every time we go on Facebook and like someone's comment or they like our post, that's actually part of gamification. Both Facebook and Twitter have mastered the art of those techniques. What happens when someone clicks, when someone likes your post, there's this chemical in the brain that's called dopamine that's released. That's the chemical that is behind making you feel happier, right? In fact, it has been also established by a study by 2 sociologists in the US that show that volunteering and giving actually make you happier. It also helps you treat your depression. And if you want to know more about this, you can read a book called The Paradox of Generosity. It's a very, very interesting book. Gamification plays on this, inner thing in us that we want to have fun while doing good. So that's why it's not, when people think of gamification, they think it's about only collecting points or a leaderboard or a badge, which we have all of that in the app on our platform. But if you don't combine them in a certain way, if you don't have a user experience that goes with it, it will fail miserably. So it's not just about points and badges. There's much to it than that.
So I guess the basic idea is kind of trying to figure out why do people spend so much time on flipping bottles or crushing candy cane or whatever it is to, and use those ideas in things
we're also hardwired to compete. We want to win, right? We always want to. That's why we have these team competitions who raise more, right? In fact, just this morning we have a campaign. One of the teams was half of the other, and all of a sudden the parent who said he was not going to donate, all of a sudden donated $200, right? It's just to jump above the other team. So the sense of I want to be the winner. A good example is during the elections campaign, right? People change their mind at the end because they realize, oh, this candidate is the winner. So Yeah, if you unlock how people and human beings think, you unlock the secret of everything. In fact, there's a book that I recommend people read. You know him, I'm sure, Dan Ariely. His first book is called Predictably Irrational.
Yeah.
Basically, the nutshell of what he says is basically, we are irrational human beings. When we purchase things, when we give. So yeah, I mean, understanding human psychology and how people think, it will help you unlock the secrets of giving.
Robert, I know you had something to say, and I know, Michael, you're ready
really
to jump in as well.
Very quickly on gamification, we're doing the same thing in Share the Meal. One thing that we've done is to put a sort of the ability to create teams, and so you create a team that is, you could invite your friends or family or whatever. We had one couple that invited their wedding guests to share the meal in lieu of providing wedding presents, but you can then sort of compete against other teams. You can win badges and things like that. I think it's safe to say we haven't cracked it in terms of what actually works, but we continue to experiment with that.
Oh, I was going to pick up on the theme of brain chemicals and cash.
Go for it.
Which interesting thing. So I think the great thing is the donor gets this generosity boost. But what we know from poor people, certainly in the lab, is that when you have high levels of stress, which tend to get measured with cortisol, they make worse decisions. So you make much more short-sighted decisions when you're living under stress. So as you get poorer, you make worse decisions. Now the interesting thing is a few researchers for one of the Give Directly projects actually went out and measured cortisol levels about a year after people received the cash transfer. So this is a year after. And you saw meaningfully reduced cortisol or stress levels of the people that reduced the transfer. Now, if that's true more broadly, there's a good chance that the lab results hold and that they start making better decisions, and the virtuous cycle continues from there.
I'd not read that. And I'm also guessing as a corollary then, the easier these people receive the payments, the lower the frictions, hopefully the better decisions they make downstream. And
sure hope so.
That should be H1 when we do our next experiment on this stuff. Let's just, keeping an eye on the clock as well, move us back to sort of the whole notion of payment and payment technologies. And I guess we'll call this section the challenges and the wish list part. And maybe I'll start with you, Robert, simply because, as United Nations, your canvas is wide. You've seen this operating across multiple countries. Payments across national borders. What are the challenges there, and what are the opportunities, and what's the I wish we had a solution list look like for you?
Sure. No, well, in every national context, of course, and Michael knows this well, also, regulations are different, and if we're on mobile money platforms or e-cards or whatever different platforms are out there, you have to negotiate with a new set of actors in every single context, and that is a challenge. I think the overall cost and fee structure is a challenge for us, because every dollar that we don't have to spend in the intermediaries, we can put toward the benefit going to the ultimate people that we're trying to reach. And so things like, we're at the moment we're trying to look at alternatives to the conventional systems that we set up. For example, we're doing a pilot for a blockchain based system that would allow us to reduce our reliance on local banks, which charge fees for some of the reconciliation related to the payment value chain. So things like that are some of the challenges. And just really quickly on the benefits, what I'd see in terms of benefit is, no question, the data that you get out of the digital payment systems is absolutely incredible compared to what we used to have and be able to gather. So, I mean, part of it is just the digital shift in general. But in the payments, you really can see and look at people's behaviors. We can also study the patterns. For example, in Lebanon, where we give unconditional cash, and even Jordan, where we allow people to choose among a number of basket goods, we look at the buying patterns, and then we can go back to the supply chain, all along the supply chain, and try to get better prices out of our suppliers so that those goods are made available more cheaply in the local retail outlets for the people that are shopping, the refugees that are shopping there.
Okay. Michael, I think on the research, kind of, looking at the data and analyzing, you guys have done a fair bit of work, and I know you've been involved in research that kind of better helps us understand both the giving behavior and the recipient behavior. Can you talk us through some of that, or what opportunities you see there?
Oh, sure. I think the opportunity is the end of poverty, full stop. I think if we solve the problem of getting money in the hands of the kind of remaining billion living under the poverty line, we can solve poverty, period. I think there are a lot of challenges, and they're anything from kind of infrastructural, working with web portals, to regulatory, to the agent liquidity problem. I love Robert's list. It's the same reason. Those are the reasons why we launched Segovia, half of them. But Segovia solves a fraction of the problems. One thing that got alluded to earlier, specifically mentioned earlier, is de-risking. The reality is we are in a world right now that is dramatically de-risking on the developed world side. And we are not yet sophisticated enough to distinguish between kind of African countries. You'll hear things like, we don't do Africa. Well, I say, which country in Africa? Just Africa. We need the banks to be open to serving Africa, to serving parts of Asia. And there's responsibilities on both sides. On the other side, we need to get more sophisticated about our identification systems, about local AML and KYC regulation. Aadhaar in India is making big steps, but if we move to a world where identity can be verified, where we do have the security of who is being sent the money, there are a lot of people on the SDN list, and if we have that confidence, then we can start kind of rewinding the de-risking that's going on now and open up the payment flows.
Maher, any thoughts on challenges, technology, or otherwise?
Well, the numbers are clear on where giving is going. People are actually becoming more generous. If you look at the numbers and how they evolve over time, if you just look at United States, as of last year, 374 billion were donated. In the Canada, I think the number is 14 billion, and the UK is about 160 plus. Now, as the borders are opening more and more, I expect people to become even more generous when they see, especially when you have integrate technologies like virtual reality, for example, which it gives people the feeling and the experience of living with someone in Africa, for example. One case, for example, one use case for this would be, in Africa, it's not easy as here to, not all parts of Africa, but it's not easy as here to have access to water, right? Some families have to travel miles and to get water. It would be interesting for me, for example, to experience what it feels like, right? Using virtual reality. A 15-minute, 20-minute, or half-an-hour session will actually encourage me. It would be also interesting to integrate payments into virtual reality. But with that, there's going to be challenges, which already starting. Right now, peer-to-peer is gaining momentum, which is good and bad because sometimes the money do not go where it's supposed to go. And this open the possibility for fraud. Yeah. We need more techniques, more automated, machine-driven techniques to detect fraud. We're not there yet. So, yeah, those are challenges that I think, I don't know if we have solutions for that, but obviously technology, I'm sure will help in that respect.
So we're going to open up to questions in a couple of minutes. If you have a question, just work your way to a microphone, and that way we know that you have a question. While we wait for those microphones to be populated, I have a couple of other quick things to just kind of jump in and talk about. So I think the notion of peer-to-peer is interesting. You talked about the, building a nice vetting process and thinking through what machine learning can bring to the table. Who's going to do this? And the reason I ask this is because if you look at the incentive structures of the different players. It's not clear to me that any one player has the incentive to come up with a efficient, cheap, simple, and a trustworthy marketplace for giving. How is this going to happen? Any thoughts?
Well,
Curveball question there.
yeah, Costsquare is in a way a marketplace for giving as well as the app, I think. I think micro donations is one way to get around this. There are various startups now who are solving this problem. The main obstacle is obviously that fixed rate, and some of them are going around this problem by processing the money in batches or something like that. So I guess how can you make donation as part of everyday today life? And millennials, people between the ages of 20 to 35, is actually responding positively to this. They are more socially aware. They're more open to other cultures. I think over time, giving will be part of our daily life. Maybe not me. I mean, I'm already 48, but I see this huge trend happening.
I'm not worried about the incentives to innovate on raising money. Every organization, every NGO has an incentive to raise more money.
Yep.
And if I can spend $1 to raise $10, every one of us is going to take that opportunity. What I am more worried about is innovating on the distribution of money. Because there is no incentive outside of our generosity, and I think we all share this here, of doing it better. So unlike the private markets where there's a direct feedback, you buy an iPhone, you spend a few $100s on it, you don't like it, you don't buy the next one. It doesn't work that way with the poor. They're not paying for the service, they're not the paying customer. Like, they don't really get to complain and say, wait, I don't want that next time. The paying customer in this world is the donor. So there's an incentive to raise more from the donor, and I hope as donors get smarter and ask tougher questions of NGOs, they will put the pressure on people like us to do even better work on the distribution of funds.
We have a question here, so why don't we take that, and then maybe we can get to Robert as well. And yes.
Hello. So a lot of things that you guys spoke about is making it easier for people to donate. And I find that makes it very easy for a one-time gift. How are some of the solutions to do donor retention, to make sure to go after the same donor who has given once and be able to give again and again and participate in the conversation, not just be a one-time gift?
So interesting question. I think it's a big theme too in behavioral sciences, is you can nudge people into doing something once.
Yes.
But how do you make them loyal? I don't know if anyone has.
Well, I think you put your finger on the right nerve. Acquiring donors is probably much easier than retaining them. We all know every organization nonprofit pays a lot of money just to make people sign up on a monthly basis. The way to go around this is you have to keep engaging your donor. Don't just ask for donations during the giving season. You have to give them feedback, an easy feedback, short, concise feedback about how your money is making a difference. I don't want to give money to an organization and then wait until next year to hear back from them. Video is a big thing. Nowadays, producing video is really very affordable these days. Why not just every once in a while update your donors about how their money is making a difference? That's why in our platform, we don't actually use email as a way to communicate with the donors. We use push notifications, both mobile and web. The main reason is, web notifications or mobile notifications have about 80 to 90% open rate, as opposed to email, which is around 20-25%. And the reason people open them is because they know it's going to be brief. Okay, whereas the email, they have no clue. It could be 2-3 pages email, right? I mean, how many of you have received long emails from organizations that they could have just written 2-3 lines, right? Also, the notifications play on this fear of missing out, kind of fear that is present in all of us. So we always want, if you watch yourself on a daily basis, you'll see that it's very rare that you dismiss the notifications. I'm a heavy Twitter user, and I don't remember even dismissing any of the notifications, right? Because I want to feel that so basically the short answer is ongoing engagement, transparency, accountability, and to empower your donors to actually become also fundraisers. Engage them, right? Make them feel they are part of you, part of the organization. Don't try to control them too much, right? And that's why all the features we have on our platform actually allow the organizations to just do that. Sit at the top, for example, watch, oversee people, but give them the freedom to do the work for you and feel empowered.
Robert or Michael, any thoughts on that, or retention?
Well, so everything that Maher said, I would say in the grand scheme of things, the most important thing is that people feel what they're doing has an impact, and particularly this generation that I've spoken about, that are the majority of Share the Meal users, the millennial generation, are very interested in understanding and having a very transparent and accountable sort of sense of the impact that you're making. But in terms of kind of more tactical approaches, it's exactly also what Maher said in terms of the keeping people engaged. So we introduced new features. A new feature, when we launched Share the Meal, it was fairly basic. We introduced the team feature. We introduced multiple campaigns. So we have a concurrent campaign now with Yemen and Lebanon. We're shortly going to introduce a camera integration so that people can take pictures of what they're eating or whatever it is, and then post that on Instagram, Facebook, or whatever it is they want, and sort of share that they're sharing a meal. So it push notifications. So it's a constant kind of push to stay creative and get people engaged. Because the reality is, and I think in Share the Meal, about 30% of the people who download give once and that's it. So our objective is to get that from 30 to, well, nothing. But.
That's the remarkable thing about this sector is that's not a low number. I looked at this once. The 30 to 40%, I think, is about median. Yeah. So it's a pretty average number, which is a pretty remarkably low retention rate as a sector.
We have a couple of minutes and one question, and so maybe a brief one.
Just like to ask a question about source of funds. You mentioned credit cards and fees that the credit card companies charge. Do you have any special relationships with the banks, credit card companies to facilitate the giving? Or, I don't know, any kind of arrangements with your donors as to where the source of their funds come from?
Well, from my side, when we're talking about the credit card type of payment structures, it's really just our individual donors. So it's that subset of our overall contributions, which, as I mentioned, the primary source of contributions is actually government donors. But from the individual side, we have managed to get, and on case-by-case negotiation, sometimes we get beneficial rates out of financial service providers. When I say beneficial, they're not free, but they might be just slightly lower than full commercial rate. I think, and that's fine. I don't think we expect anyone to do it for a completely, cost-only basis. I think the issue comes more in the space of micropayments for us, and that it just gets hard to sort of cast the word out and get everyone to kind of give 50 cents a day when every single time you have that flat fee. So that's just one challenge that we have, and we've discussed that with the different companies and things, and they're trying to work with us.
All right. I'm keeping an eye on that clock there, which is counting us down towards 0. We're soon going to have a bright red light flashing at us, which means that while we could go on and on with this conversation, I think we we have to call it time. Maher Arar, Michael Faye, Robert Opp, thank you so very much. This was fascinating. And I hope just the beginning of a new chapter in the role of payments in charitable giving. I'm looking forward to the book 5 years from now when we'll all be writing chapters on how technology has changed the face of charitable giving. So thank you very much. And to all of you, thanks for coming. Enjoy the rest of the conference.